I stared at the pay stub in my hands until the numbers blurred together. 75 cents an hour. Not a mistake. Not a glitch in the system. 75 cents for every hour I'd clocked in that freezing warehouse in the outskirts of Chicago, moving pallets and scanning barcodes for 56 hours straight last week. The paper felt flimsy, almost weightless, like it couldn't possibly carry the weight of a man's dignity being crushed under corporate boots. My chest tightened. Breathing became something I had to remind myself to do. There he was, leaning against the breakroom doorframe like he owned the air itself. Marcus Reynolds, Director of Operations at Apex Logistics. The golden boy with the perfect haircut and the smile that never quite reached his eyes. He'd been waiting. The smirk on his face said everything before he even opened his mouth. "Looks like we finally got your compensation aligned with your actual output," he said. Voice smooth as oil. I didn't respond. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out the hum of the vending machine spitting out its mechanical sigh. Marcus stepped closer. The scent of his overpriced cologne mixed with the stale coffee and desperation that hung heavy in every corner of that break room. "Some folks just aren't built for minimum wage anymore," he continued, each word dripping condescension. "But hey, you keep showing up. That's dedication. Or maybe just survival instinct." He winked, like we were sharing a joke at my expense, then strolled away whistling a tune that echoed off the cinderblock walls. Heat crawled up my spine, slow and molten. Not the hot flash of shame I might have felt years ago. This was different. Colder. More precise. Rage that didn't explode outward but coiled inward, memorizing every syllable, every twitch of his lips. I sat on the cracked plastic bench, pulled out my phone, and opened the banking app. $43.50 deposited for the entire week. My laugh came out dry, hollow. That wouldn't cover even half of Dad's next round of chemo. He had maybe 3 weeks of meds left if we stretched them thin. But stretching meant risks, pain spikes, nights where he couldn't sleep from the burning in his bones. I'd already pawned my old camera gear, the watch Mom gave me before she passed, the gaming console I used to escape on weekends. The apartment felt emptier every month. No microwave. No extra furniture. Just the essentials and the quiet fear that one missed payment would send us both spiraling. I glanced at the wall poster, a cartoon cat clinging to a branch with the words "hang in there." The irony tasted bitter. I wanted to tear it down, set the whole room ablaze. Instead, I stood, clocked back in. The scanner beeped like accusations with every package I sealed. Marcus's voice looped in my head on repeat. "Some folks just aren't built for minimum wage. You stop being a person to them. You become a cost line on a spreadsheet, a liability they can trim without blinking." I didn't rant to my coworkers in the break room. Sarah from receiving gave me that pitying look. Mike from loading dock shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke up. We all had our chains. Rent in a city that never slept. Kids' school fees. Aging parents. Medical debt that grew faster than interest. Silence wasn't cowardice. It was strategy. That night, sleep refused to come. I sat at the tiny kitchen table under the single bulb, pulling up old folders on my laptop I'd kept hidden for years. Screenshots, time-stamped videos from late shifts, emails forwarded to a dummy account, internal memos about corner cutting on safety protocols, ghost payroll entries, supplier kickbacks neatly documented. I hadn't planned this back then. Or maybe I had. In the quiet way a man plans for storms he sees on the horizon. 5 years ago, I was the night shift guy nobody noticed. When systems crashed at 3 in the morning, I was the one who came in, hoodie up, fixing things with admin access they granted because I was reliable and quiet. That's when I started seeing the cracks. Invoices that didn't add up. Time clocks that could be fudged with a quick USB override. Inventory discrepancies that magically benefited the executive bonuses labeled vaguely as performance incentives. I never reported it. Reporting meant becoming a target. Instead, I built quiet backdoors. A small script tweak here to duplicate manager overrides without logging them. A rerouted backup path there to a hidden partition only I controlled. I told myself it was insurance. Cover your ass material. But deep down, I knew it was more. It was preparation. Marcus had made it personal now. Publicly humiliating me while my father fought cancer alone in a hospital room I could barely afford to visit. He thought I'd swallow it like always. Head down, clock in, take the scraps. But the fuse had been lit years ago. I just hadn't struck the match. The next morning, I walked into HR with the stub in hand. The office smelled of artificial lavender and quiet resignation. Elena, the HR coordinator, barely looked up from her oversized tumbler, waving me to the chair like an inconvenience. "There's been an error," I said evenly. 75 cents an hour. She clicked her mouse, pulled up a spreadsheet. "That reflects your reclassification to temporary backroom support during restructuring," she replied without emotion. "It's in the handbook." Management signed off. I pressed. "This isn't a typo? Someone deliberately set my rate this low." Her eyes flicked to the door. "Your supervisor approved it, Marcus." The smile she gave me was the kind reserved for people already written off. I stood slowly, rage anchored by clarity. In the hallway, Marcus leaned against the wall, charming and in turn, calling out, "Our most dedicated employee, still here after asking for a raise." The intern laughed nervously. I stared at him, unblinking, the kind of look you give a snake before deciding whether to strike. He winked again. "Loyalty like yours is priceless." Well, almost. That was the turning point. Not a lightning bolt, but a slow tear of muscle fiber by fiber. I was done begging a system rigged against me. Done being the punchline. In the break room line, coworkers avoided my eyes. The coffee machine gurgled like it knew secrets. But inside, something had unlocked. A version of me they'd never met. Patient and precise. Back home that evening, the apartment felt smaller than usual. Dad's hospital bed took up half the living room now. The beeping monitors a constant reminder of how thin our margin for error had become. I sat beside him while he dozed, his hand cold in mine, and opened the encrypted folder labeled insurance. It had started innocently enough years earlier. Late nights alone in the server room, the only light from flickering monitors. I'd noticed patterns. Vendor contracts with hidden clauses favoring Apex executives. Overtime approvals funneled to favorites. Inventory adjustments that padded bonuses. I never touched anything then. I just observed, documented, built tools quietly. A shadow script that mirrored certain transactions. A backup routine rerouted to an external drive only I could access. Encrypted with a passphrase I changed monthly. Silence became my greatest asset. Coworkers called me the ghost in the machine. Reliable but invisible. They had no idea I was mapping every artery in the company's financial body, noting pressure points without ever drawing blood. The day Marcus slashed my pay wasn't random. It was inevitable. Every firing without cause. Every restructuring to install a relative. Every condescending joke at an intern's expense had chipped away at my restraint. Now, with Dad's next treatment cycle looming and my bank account mocking me with $43, restraint evaporated. I started small. Not with rage-fueled hacks, but calculated erosion. Tuesday morning, the ops team gathered in the dim conference room with its flickering projector. Marcus swaggered in late, Starbucks in hand, announcing lean innovation season. His eyes locked on me in the back row. "Some of us need to embrace being part of the solution," he said, pointing directly. "Even if that means accepting a less competitive rate." Nervous chuckles rippled through the room. "Remember, scraps beat nothing. And some don't even deserve scraps." The room went still. I stood without a word, nodded once, and walked out. No outburst. Just the internal click of a safety disengaging. Back at my desk, I pulled the old burner laptop from my locker. First step, trigger a quiet data scrape of executive contracts, expense reports, vendor agreements spanning 6 years. It masqueraded as routine maintenance. Second, encrypt and mirror the haul to secure off-site locations. 1 deadman email. 1 VPS in a neutral jurisdiction. 1 flash drive in my pocket. Third, launch a decoy printer error ticket to divert IT attention. Fourth, wipe traces. It took under 5 minutes. By the time Marcus passed my desk later, tossing another smug glance, the first threads were already pulling loose. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was orchestrating. The drains began subtly, small enough to look like rounding errors or legacy system quirks. 31,000 here from logistics budget discrepancies. 480 from petty cash reimbursements for phantom events. Accounting dismissed them with jokes about outdated software. I watched from my corner desk. Face blank. Entering dummy data. Sending misdirection emails. Every action a signal only I understood. Paranoia crept into Marcus's demeanor gradually. He hovered over department heads reviewing budgets. Rewrote emails obsessively. Spent hours in the server room pretending to understand permissions. Popped into HR meetings with forced casualness that screamed impending firings. The smell of fear leaked through his cologne. Meanwhile, I sipped burnt coffee 10 feet away, typing meaningless formulas, maintaining the mask of the defeated employee still clocking in at 75 cents. He never suspected me. Why would he? I was the loyal loser. The guy grateful for scraps. The one who kept showing up after public castration. My expression stayed neutral. No smirks. No tells. Inside, though, each missing dollar tasted like balance slowly restoring. The company whispered in code, Q4 reconciliation off. Vendor IDs don't match? Where's this money bleeding? I siphoned from the margins bloated training funds, unverified travel, auto-renewed subscriptions no one used. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. Marcus spun in circles chasing ghosts, while I sat quietly harvesting the rot he'd cultivated. By Monday, the numbers had escalated. 23,000 missing at 9:17 a.m. 138,000 by 11. Over 1.2 million across multiple accounts by lunch. All flagged, pending reconciliation. Phones rang relentlessly. Executive lines. Investor cells. Marcus's face drained of color mid-call. Sweat beaded on his forehead, soaking his tailored shirt. The internal audit team scrambled. But the ghost-eyed release multiplied itself through mirrored transactions with built-in lags, routing through seeded offshore accounts that looked legitimate on the surface. I observed from my desk, hands steady on the keyboard. Marcus slammed a whiteboard in the finance area, firing 2 junior accountants on the spot, one breaking down in tears. The emergency meeting followed. Temporary irregularities, he insisted. Voice cracking. Elena raised a hand. False positives or actual losses? He snapped back. But the room's silence said everything. Staff huddled near bathrooms, whispering about 401ks and retirement safety. Legal froze transfers too late. The bleed continued. In that chaos, Marcus's gaze landed on me across the floor. A flicker of subconscious suspicion. He said nothing. Acknowledging me would mean admitting how long I'd watched, how thoroughly I understood the system he thought he controlled. I turned back to my screen, took a sip of coffee that suddenly tasted less bitter, and allowed the smallest internal smile. The office transformed into a pressure cooker. 3 HR emergency meetings before lunch. Projectors showed tropical fish screensavers while Elena stammered about financial irregularities and potential bankruptcy proceedings. The espresso machine broke and stayed broken. Even the toughest veterans looked shell-shocked. Marcus stopped shaving. His ties clashed. He paced like a trapped animal, calling people into his glass office for tense confrontations ending in slammed doors and audible dead-weight dismissals. At 3:30, he summoned me. I entered with the same tired, unthreatening expression I'd worn for years. He closed the door softly. "I know it's you," he hissed immediately. I tilted my head. "Sorry?" He gripped the desk edge, knuckles white. "You've had system access forever. Late nights. You know every backdoor." I blinked innocently. "I'm not sure what you're accusing me of." His swagger faltered. The costume no longer fit. "You're going to fix this," he demanded. But desperation undercut the command. "Go in tonight. Patch the leak before we sink." I let silence stretch, then nodded. "Of course. Happy to help. Just send the credentials." Fear flashed in his eyes then, raw and real. The power had shifted completely. He was begging the man he'd publicly stripped of worth. I left calmly. Inside, satisfaction bloomed, not gloating, but the quiet knowledge that he finally understood he'd lost long before the numbers showed it. The headlines hit Friday morning like a hammer. Chicago logistics firm probed for massive financial misconduct. 9.4 million unaccounted for. SEC and FBI launch investigation into suspected internal sabotage. The office froze. No coffee brewed. Whispers replaced conversations.
Client cancelled.
Partners paused payments. Employees scrolled LinkedIn in unison. Sensing blood. Private security arrived mid-morning. 2 men in dark jackets, moving with practiced efficiency. They entered Marcus's office. For minutes later, he emerged carrying a cardboard box and laptop bag. Eyes fixed on the floor, hollowed out. The floor watched in collective silence as he passed the break room where he once mocked me. No laughter now. Just the heavy quiet of witnessed reckoning. Someone whispered, "Holy shit." Marcus's departure left a vacuum. The CEO issued a vague Zoom statement from a distant resort promising full cooperation. Legal teams swarmed, locking systems, launching forensic audits. I sat at my desk, untouched and unnoticed, the work already complete. The humiliation of that 75-cent stub still burned, but revenge wasn't erasure. It was equilibrium. The scales leveled, perhaps tipped slightly in favor of those who'd been ground down. I came in early Monday for one final walk through the halls while the building still echoed with consequences. Lights flickered. Desks sat abandoned mid-task. The printer room smelled of burnt plastic and anxiety. No one sat anymore. Everyone awaited the next shoe, layoffs, federal visits, press statements that never materialized. I emptied my drawer, a mug, wiped USB, notebook of decoys, left the company mousepad behind. Hustle hard, led harder. The irony drew a quiet chuckle. In the break room, Sarah stood by the humming coffee machine, cup clutched like armor. She glanced up, looked away quickly. The dynamic had shifted. The pitted man had become something else. Something they couldn't name. I poured one last cup, let the silence speak, then left without farewell. No speeches, no Slack posts. Spectacle was an ode. The performance had happened invisibly, 1 decimal at a time. Behind the curtain, outside. I glanced back. Marcus's parking spot stood empty. His name scraped off the placard. Word spread he'd been blacklisted. His reputation poison. No one would hire the man associated with oversight failure and internal collapse. And no one would believe the quiet night shift guy he'd reduced to scraps had orchestrated the downfall. I didn't need belief. Memory would suffice. He paid me 75 cents an hour. In return, the company paid with millions every hour until nothing remained. No confession. No trail. No applause. Just a man walking away from ruins he'd constructed patiently in the shadows. Sometimes justice wears the face of silence. Sometimes it follows you home and lingers, asking whether balancing the scales made you any different from those who tipped them first. The question hung in the air long after the building faded in the rearview. The final days blurred into procedural haze. Federal agents arrived with warrants. Servers were imaged. Employees were interviewed one by one. I answered questions calmly, playing the shocked line worker who'd simply shown up despite everything. No one connected the dots to the man with the 75-cent stub. The investigation dragged. But Apex Logistics never recovered. Contracts evaporated. Funding dried. The company filed for Chapter 11 within months. A shell of its former self. Dad's treatments continued. Funded now by careful savings and side gigs I'd quietly lined up in advance. The apartment felt less oppressive. I bought a new microwave. Small comforts that marked distance from the old life. But the memory of Marcus's smirk never fully faded. Nor did the coiled rage that had fueled years of preparation. In quiet moments, I wondered about the cost. Had I become the calculation I despised? A man who drained a system dry without raising his voice? The moral question echoed when the powerful steal dignity in broad daylight. Is measured response justice or merely mirrored cruelty? The ruins stood as testament. But the silence that followed carried its own weight, heavy and final. I walked away unbound, the ghost finally stepping into daylight. Not triumphant in spectacle, but in the profound, haunting equilibrium of a long game played to its inevitable end.